cloud security will become cybersecurity? Would you agree, disagree? What are your thoughts are on that?
I like the idea and I like the opportunity and I like the innovation. And I also think that for those of us that work primarily in tech, I think it's easy to think like everything's in the cloud or moving to the cloud. But like actually, there's a broader, wider view of like all the software on the planet. And there is so much that's still not cloud. And I think there's actually so much change management that would require it to move to the cloud that there will be this rapid evolution for a big chunk, but there will be another big chunk that's either going to move super slowly or like kind of never at all.
Interesting.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. I still see job requirements for COBOL, and they're so delicate that even doing a pen test is utterly terrifying. And rather than they're like, oh, well, we could move it to the cloud, but it'll cost so much. It costs more than we make from the thing.
And we're going live in 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to Cloud Security Podcast. Welcome to everyone watching the show. I have two lovely people over here who's going to talk about why is application security eating cloud security for lunch, breakfast, dinner, whatever suits their fancy. But before we go into it, we'd love to know a bit about yourself as well. So audience and the people on behind the camera get to know a bit about yourself as well.
Cool. Hi, I'm Caroline. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Cobalt. I began my information security career in 2005, leading security teams at eBay and Zynga. And since that time, I've held product management leadership roles and done management consulting. And for the last 7 years, I've been on the Cobalt team. We do pen testing as a service. I host a podcast called Humans of InfoSec, and I'm really interested in security metrics.
Awesome. Tanya.
Hi, I'm Tanya, Janca, and I'm the CEO and founder of We Hack Purple. I also do all sorts of things like Caroline. I'm listening to you. I'm like, oh, I really need to like up my ante in my bio. I wrote a book. I do lots of stuff as well, but both of us love apps.
She was once mentioned in Rolling Stone.
Oh,
Yeah.
by the way, she has a
Fun fact,
She used to have a band as well.
Tanya Janca on Spotify. Check it out. Canadian Ani DeFranco, but better.
Oh, now that we have that out of the way, and maybe we can have a singing session later on as well if people are up for it. But let's just basically level up the playing field for people, because a couple of the conversations that I had were more around, hey, application security, cloud security, don't really agree. But many people look at those as, how do you define it? I think that's where I'm coming from, because a lot of people, to see application security, they have a version in their mind. Cloud security, I have a version in my mind. Would love to hear from both of you as to what do you feel is application security according to you, and how would you define it?
So people say application security. I actually like the term software security. Software doesn't just include applications. The way that I look at it is there's a process to build and then test and then maintain and operate software. And there's stuff that you need to do to make it secure.
Yep.
Cloud is just like a place where it lives. And is it on-prem? Do you have control over the server? Or is it in the cloud? And is that actually a shared responsibility between the person who's building the app or owning the app and the cloud provider? So that's just how I think of it.
Awesome.
I love it. I love it. Every single thing you do to try to ensure that the software is secure is part of AppSec. And that could mean listening to a podcast and realizing, oh crap, we have that super vulnerable version of that library and we should update it. It means fixing bugs. It means testing. Exactly.
Log4j can be scary. Oh, I think so. Maybe my version of cloud security is more around, like, I used to have a thing called product security. And the idea was, because we're more going towards, like, the more digital transformation you do, the more products you're building, and the more products you have, ultimately our goal is to be product security people. And so I would have a team, which is product security team, which had AppSec people and the cloud security engineers as well, which somehow is not a very popular concept, apparently, because, like, why are we working together? We should be, like, doing two different things. But hey, that's my definition of cloud security. So getting into the whole eating, why do you feel application security is eating cloud security?
Did you just say getting into the whole eating?
That's right.
That's so great. I actually think that in this field, we have a lot of different metaphors. This is a new one. I feel like the traditional metaphor is like a castle with a wall and a moat. Sometimes we've got vitamin metaphors. painkiller metaphors, bolt-on metaphors, injection metaphors. The eating metaphor is a new one to me. I'm going to go with a dance metaphor.
I love that. Let's go with the dance one. So why the application security dancing around cloud security? Is that?
So AppSec and CloudSec are dancing together. Because what happens is there's moving parts, there's lots of different dancers, and maybe they're moving together or moving separately, but the outcome is as a result of a lot of different people taking a lot of different decisions and performing a lot of different actions. And it's very dynamic. It does not stay the same. So I'm curious about the eating thing. I like the eating thing, and I'm just gonna propose a dance thing.
All right, I love that. What, are you going for eating or dancing? What are you? Or singing maybe?
So I'm gonna go for both. So I feel like application security is eating cloud security because we used to be really, really crappy at security in general. And I feel like the industry really, really focused on network security. And then as we built cloud, they focused on cloud security. And I feel like now is the time for securing the software. Basically, bad guys, also known as malicious actors, it used to be really easy because firewalls sucked and people were doing a good job. But now that's a hard way to get in. And the easier way is to get in through software. And at first it was through the web app, then it's through the API, and now we're seeing supply chain attacks. And it's just, what is the easiest, cheapest way to attack the people I want to attack? And that's what they're doing. And so that's why I believe that AppSec is eating CloudSec, because it's just getting way more attention, because unfortunately we're not doing quite as good of a job.
Interesting. And so my analogy for saying the eating part was also because Amazon recently, they had their cloud security conference. And I think the first 10 minutes, the CISO of Amazon kind of called out that, hey, we need a security champions program. Now, for people who are like, ding, 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 but when you first hear that, suddenly it's like, wait, why is he talking about security champions program? And then there was another CISO who's a customer at Amazon, came a bit later. She spoke about how she's been running DevSecOps program, security champions program for such a long time. And they kind of have become almost the first cloud provider to kind of talk about it openly. Like recently, they also added application security as a pillar for if you are designing something or building something, to what he said, software where it's living, you should consider application security as well. Because to what he said, network security, unfortunately, was like a great safe haven. So my thinking about the eating part is more around the fact that we're realizing slowly that, hey, I'm on a diet. I should be paleo, or I should be eating only meat and only no carbs, basically. That's kind of where I was going with. So carbs in this context is just not caring about the network security aspect of it. There's a lot more, like, get the protein in, I guess, because you can imagine I'm into health. So I probably call that out. But that's kind of where it's coming from, where now we're at that stage in cloud security where they're realizing, oh, we need to care about application security as well. Because I can show you the alert. I can show you a dashboard. I can show you how much of it is wrong in your cloud. But ultimately, I need to talk to a developer to solve that problem. And I can't just walk up to a developer and, hey, Mr. or Miss Developer or developer person, please solve this. I've got a sprint I'm running at the moment, so there is no way I'm going to work on this right now. So that's kind of where I feel there is, even though we talk about cloud security all day, I think it is changing, but not everyone is there. And that leads me to another question for the DevSecOps space in this world that we live in now. For people who probably would have never heard the word DevSecOps and going, because we love acronyms as cybersecurity, we're amazing like that. Just keep throwing another acronym in there. How do you define DevSecOps? Like, both of you talk about DevSecOps so much, so maybe one of you can give a...
So the way that people used to make software was called waterfall. And it was like, you do a phase and then you have to go through a gate. And then you do a phase and you have to go through a gate. And then after a while, they were like, we're going to do agile. So we're going to do it faster. And then DevSecOps is like, there's devs and there's security and there's operations. And they're all doing it together all at the same time. So that's how I see DevSecOps. And I just see it as any big project. In this case, we're talking about software development that requires lots of different people with specialized skill sets. If those people work together, then you can just do cooler things. And if you're fighting with each other, then you're just going to be less effective. So that's how I think of DevSecOps.
Awesome. Go to champions for that.
Okay, so security champions were developed because there's one AppSec person, according to GitHub, for each 500 developers. So we're grossly outnumbered And so as a result, it doesn't matter how hard we work, we can never, ever keep up. And so when I did my first AppSec program, I just started talking to, all the dev teams, but very quickly there was that one person on the team that was like my person. And eventually I taught them how to use the tools. I would just talk to them each time. And eventually we would have meetings and we would do things together and I would train them on all the stuff. And then someone told me, oh, that's called Security Champions Program. And so you teach them about all the things you need and they do the security work for each one of their teams. And I give them the message, they relate the message and vice versa. They tell me, they're like, oh my gosh, this seems to be hell. And so they're sort of like your advocate on each dev team and they help you scale your program. And they're wonderful.
Like an influencer, like a social media influencer,
Totally.
but security champion.
Wait, do you mean the three of us?
Because okay, so I'm scrolling Instagram and I'm just like looking for clothes to buy. And I see like a clothing brand and they're like, buy our clothes. And then I see like a person who looks great and she's like, or he's like, check out my clothes. Don't you want to buy them? And so I feel like when you're talking about security champions, you're seeking the influencers that all the other devs are going to think is cool and then get them hooked onto what you're trying to teach.
Yes. And also, so like when the message is delivered from your peer, it's totally different than the stranger from the security team. So like if it's the person that you have coffee with every day, that you have team meetings with every day, and they're like, hey, I thought we weren't supposed to do that anymore. It's completely different than big bad security person coming in and being like, bad dev, right? Like to have your peers say to you, it's completely different than some stranger from another team, even another building. So what she said.
I need to make extra good friends with the kids that my kids look up to, namely their older cousins. And instead of me saying like, eat broccoli, it's cool, I'll just say to my niece, whom my daughter thinks is the coolest person on the planet, hey, can you just tell her that broccoli is cool? And it's going to be way more effective than, I don't know.
You might need to give her ice cream before she agrees. So.
I could maybe bribe the niece to have the conversation with my daughter, but would it be worth it if I instill in her like a passionate desire for leafy greens?
Could be, because I think I look at it very differently. I look at it more from a firefighter perspective. Like I look at all cybersecurity people most likely at this point of some kind of fire, almost like whether you take it any acronym that comes out of the cloud, CSPM, ASPM, whatever acronym, whether it's application security, cloud security. CASB, yeah, you throw all the three names that people don't care about. I think, funny enough, I did a talk in Amsterdam. I was a keynote and I spoke about the 4 C's of Gartner that no one cares about. And the first thing I asked, hey, who knows CSPM? Who knows CASB? Who knows CNAP? Not a single hand raised. And I was like, who's this guy? Like, what? Just throwing names at us. I'm like, well, welcome to my talk, because these are the 4 C's, apparently really important, but no one cares about. But it's really interesting. But if you look at the vendor space, they have put so much effort into it, but this whole market that has no idea whether they need any of this. But because, the reason I use a firefighter analogy is because it's kind of like the same concept where if you go to any town or city, firefighters are primarily volunteers, right? You kind of need to bring your society in, community, they're all in there with that one mission. But I can't recruit every person to be a firefighter. But there's some people who would have that, I guess, inner ethos to be, I want to protect this. I want to be part of this society because I want this to be the way I draw the line to development is like, everyone wants to create great quality code. No one wants to be told later on from production that, hey, by the way, that thing that you wrote has vulnerability. Can you go back and fix it? Like, I wrote that 6 months ago. I've already done 4 sprints since then. I don't even remember what that is. I'm working in a completely different language now. And you want me to go back and fix it? Good luck. Talk to my product manager. And let's talk later. So I think that's kind of how I draw that parallel. I don't know would you both agree or...
So I do, but you have to incentivize them. So when you're a firefighter, it's exciting. You get to fight fires and danger. But also I don't know if you know, but firefighters have a zillion women around them that love them. And then they're very attracted to them because they're heroes. Right. But we need to figure out a way to make it attractive and exciting and have lots of incentives. And so I'll be I gave you a security book and a high five. And so we have to figure out ways to attract them to do. Well, I try to tell them I'm turning you into a developer hero. You're the person that not only is an awesome person that writes kick-ass code, but you also know how to make sure that it's safe and that it's reliable and that it will be available for your customers. And you can share this knowledge with your peers and be like, yeah, that's right. I'm the person that knows the answers. Yeah.
So maybe to your example, just stretching that a bit more, then what would DevSecOps look like in the cloud world, according to you both? Like, what do you think? Like, would that be different? Because, I mean, it's just
It's slightly different. So I love infrastructure as code. Like, as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, it's code. It makes sense to me now. Before, I was like copying images for 2 hours at a time. Like, it's 30 days old. That's not golden anymore. It's rusty and tarnished. And so infrastructure as code really excited me because I could do all the same things like version control. I could scan it. I could add the code. I'm like, haha, I can add my own code. So I really like that. And that's much easier in the cloud.
right.
You can also do a lot more automation in the cloud, like cloud events. So whether it be like a Logic app or whatever. But I remember like with Azure, I was making an intentionally vulnerable demo and I checked in like a fake username, password, connection string. And it's like, oh, I don't think you should do that. And I was like, yeah, do. And it was like, no. And so if you were doing DevOps on-prem, then so I just forced it and I was like, go away. I'm a dev. You'll do as I say. Because devs can do that. We can do it. We obey policies just to be nice. We don't have to.
Yep.
They're all hackers.
Yep.
Just no one told them. It's called a workaround or an exploit, same thing. So I was like, oh, okay, just go. And then I get a phone call from my boss and Azure had called him. Yeah. And then him and I were laughing. He's like, ha, you made Azure angry, ha. And we're laughing. I'm like, oh, I have a beep, 1 second. And it's the real incident response team.
Oh, wow.
And they didn't think it was funny at all. And I'd gotten them up at like 10:30 at night on a Sunday. And no one thought I was cool. It took me a long time to make friends with the incident response team. But the point of the story is that that wouldn't happen on-prem. You need the cloud to be able to get that level of interaction.
Yeah.
Like Azure can literally make a phone call. And I'm not saying run owned by Azure, blah, blah, blah. I'm not trying to say one is better than the other, but just that the cloud can do that. And on-prem, you'd have to think to automate that, whereas cloud vendors are providing this as a service just generally.
Yeah. I was going to add another layer to it because you have the security assurance kind of space in your landscape as well. Because do you see impacts of DevSecOps in the security assurance aspect as well? Because we spoke about this earlier where people are expecting to be releasing more frequently, but can you really do pen tests, like 5 pen tests in 5 minutes kind of a thing? But I'm curious to know DevSecOps in that angle as well as to.
So I have been studying technical manual security effort for a lot of years. And in the past, a security team that needed pen testing, for example, basically had 2 options. You could either hire an internal team, which is hard to do because that talent is in really high demand, or you could call up a consulting company and say, hey, can I do a project? And they would say, yeah, and we've got such and such rates and we've got such and such bench and we'll like get to your project, like you'll go into the queue. So one of the really cool things about cloud native apps is they're just fast.
Yeah.
They're just, you make them fast, you change them fast. You can also test them fast because you can give remote access to a really skilled person who can then go and perform testing on it. And that can actually happen so much quicker than flying a consultant from halfway around the world to your headquarters and physically badging them in and then getting them physical access to your on-prem thing. I think there's also this ownership piece that I alluded to before, and I think it's really interesting. I think in some ways, for organizations that were born into the cloud and that are cloud native, like it's just easier. I think that for organizations that started out or maybe still have tons of legacy on-prem infrastructure and are like moving into the cloud, there's a lot of transition to be managed because it's a different tech, it's different business processes, it's different skill sets. And so I think that, just being able to start fresh is way easier than having a thing that's been existing for a really long time and trying to completely shift the model in which you do things.
I was going to say, do you feel that a lot of people are saying cloud security is going to become cybersecurity? As in, because if you think about what truly cloud security is, what both of you called out as well, the intention over there was more along the lines of if everything is moving to the cloud and as everything gets digitally transformed, more products, more microservices, more all of that, are we looking forward to a world with more abstraction? Cloud security will become cybersecurity? Would you agree, disagree? What are your thoughts are on that?
I think it's a really interesting question. I like the idea and I like the opportunity and I like the innovation. And I also think that for those of us that work primarily in tech, I think it's easy to think like everything's in the cloud or moving to the cloud. But like actually, there's a broader, wider view of like all the software on the planet. And there is so much that's still not cloud. And I think there's actually so much change management that would require it to move to the cloud that there will be this rapid evolution for a big chunk, but there will be another big chunk that's either going to move super slowly or like kind of never at all.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. There's still, so like I got to work on an app 2 years ago that was 38 years old. So not quite as old as me, but almost. And I was just like, whoa, we need to be gentle with this elderly application. That's not going to the cloud. Or if it does, it's going to be in like this beautiful container with a giant cage around it. And like, we're just going to like be like, it's okay all the time, right? To keep it going. And so I think that, and there's just some stuff that is too sensitive to ever go to the cloud. Like I used to do counterterrorism work. I'm sorry. I remember saying to a lawyer, like, you can't have your windows open. And they're like, this isn't a movie. And then I informed them of all the different times that the course of a case has changed. Because like in Canada, there was this one case that was in the newspapers where they had a telescope and 2 kilometers away, they're reading over their shoulder. And then basically a criminal about to go free as a result. And so I'm like, so switch your monitor around, do this, do that, or I'm calling CSIS on you again. And so I feel like there's certain things that will never be appropriate to go to the cloud, no offense, but it's just matters of national security or such important intellectual property or innovation that is just completely unacceptable. Like even just that tiny risk, because it's so valuable that it would be worth it to a cloud employee to steal it. Entire threats are real.
Yeah. Because I think one of the reasons why I find fascinating is also because there's also a movement in parallel where a lot of companies are saying we're going back to data center. We're building our own data center as well. So, and
it's like return to the office, but for servers.
Yeah, return to 3 days a week only. That would be amazing. 3 days a week? What? Once a month? But I guess there is definitely a movement in that space as well, where people who were the first movers into cloud, they're all coming back and going, wait.
Why?
This was, Oh, actually, so a lot of people said, couple of examples where some people said cost optimization. Some people had, I think one of the companies we met, what they said is, so if Amazon has a latency period of, I don't know, half an hour, an hour, they just can't deal with it. For them, it's 1 billion people ordering groceries online and, you want a half an hour maintenance window? Great. Like that's just not going to fly for them. So they believe that if they have access to the hardware, they can manage all of that before maintenance and all of that. So the large scale companies sometimes would choose to go down the path. I'm just going to own the infrastructure. And also then there is a conflict of interest part as well. Like for example, Home Depot or Staples, they would not go for Amazon.
Oh yeah. None of the realtors ever will go with Amazon. They're like,
right. Yeah. And that at what point, because I think someone described the cloud service providers as like octopus with all these tentacles everywhere, where suddenly you see all these new business units starting and now they're doing automation. I mean, now Apple has a savings account. So you're going, all they're looking for is where else can we go into this space and how else can we go? I mean, I guess absorb into it if we want to as well. That's kind of where we're going from this as well. But that's kind of where it's coming from. And I have 2 more questions. What would be our biggest challenge if someone was to start DevSecOps today? They've never done this before and they go down the path of just doing DevSecOps. What would be the biggest challenge according to you?
I'm going to twist my answer to the question just a bit and say my biggest advice is to be really curious and to listen and learn. I think that especially if you're a security professional, there's an opportunity to say to dev folks and to ops folks, tell me about how you work. Tell me about what's important to you. That's like a radically different thing than coming in and saying, you're doing this wrong, you should do this instead. And so I think the challenge is when people are not willing to understand someone else's point of view. And then the counterpoint advice that I would give is be really curious, ask a lot of questions, ask with the intention to learn and try and figure out like what will work with what's already there.
Okay, so you sort of stole my biggest challenge because I was going to say learning what to do can be really hard. But I would say another big challenge that I see is you see the way other security people behave. That's not necessarily the way you need to behave. And I remember starting with a team where they would just say no all the time. And so then I started saying no. And then I was like, why am I saying no? Is that really the right answer right now? Maybe it's like, oh, actually, so if we do that, there's a lot of risk to our org. And here's why there's risk. But there's like these 3 other options that all present less risk. Are any of these possible for you? Like, can we afford them? Do we have time to implement them? Is this allowed? Like, could we talk about these? And sometimes we still have to do this thing and I throw a WAF or something else in front of it because I'm really afraid. But most of the time we can find ways to compromise. And so just because you see someone else doing it this way, think as you learn, like, is that the way I want to act? Because when I first started, I worked with a lot of pen testers, and some of them, quite frankly, had very few ethics and did a lot of things where I'm like, that seems illegal. That's probably, turns out it was illegal. So stuff like subcontracting me to work on systems I had no permission and just giving me all the prod credentials on everything and setting me loose with all sorts of hacker tools in data centers I should not have been in. And I was like, are you sure you have permission? And like, they put it to me that they did. Client had no idea. And so like, ask yourself, like, does this seem like the right thing? And this could be as much as like saying no or just saying yes blindly. So think about it and think like, would this work for me? Do I feel I'm being fair, etc.?
Yeah. There's a little trust but verify involved in that. A little bit like ask and then just go and check it out for yourself and like see if it matches.
Yes, and I want to add one more thing along with learning everything like Caroline said, if you can find a mentor. So sometimes I would just ask my mentor. So my first mentor and I broke up spectacularly because of ethics. My next one, like he would always be like, no, obviously you can't do that. That's crap. And he helped steer me in much more ethical ways where I felt proud of all my decisions. And I think that's really important. And so yes, trust but verify, like she said.
I want to comment on something Tanya said, which is that it is the year 2023. We are figuring this out. There is not one way to do this. If you're getting into this, you have an opportunity to really check it out for yourself and really decide for yourself what is the right thing for you and maybe your organization to do. This is innovation. This is pioneering. And this is, I think, why cloud security is so exciting to us. Because we're kind of making it up as we go along. And there's something extremely fun about that.
Awesome. Well, the final question was actually for the audience, because do you feel cloud security is being eaten by application security or dancing around it or singing around it? You got 3 choices. Comment below. Thank you for coming on the show. Where can people find you on the internet of the world? So if they want to follow.
I'm on LinkedIn, Caroline Wong. Cobalt.io is the company that I work for. Those are I don't like do Twitter anymore. Maybe I should.
It's okay.
Okay. Anyway.
I'm She Hacks Purple all over the internet. So if you look up She Hacks Purple, there is an impersonator I have now. So I am not the busty, cleavagey lady trying to sell you online gambling. So as long as you don't see that, it's probably me. If you see geeky, nerdy content about AppSec, that is me.
Wow.
I've gone to that level where I have an imitator now.
Wow.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
AI. Yeah.
I wish it was AI.
Yeah, I was going to say, that sounds like AI at that point in time. Yeah, that's all right. But I will leave those links in the comment as well in the show notes of the episode. But thank you everyone for joining in.